The siren echoed in the distance, mixed with the sound of cars wetting the asphalt of Union Street. The San Francisco sky was still bearing the brunt of last night's rain. Lisa Carter held tight to the strap of her worn purse, while her hurried footsteps resounded on the cold sidewalk. The threadbare brown coat protected little from the icy wind, but she didn't complain. His lowered eyes avoided looks. No one noticed her, but she saw everything. At the Whitmore mansion, crystals shimmered under her impeccable cleanliness, and the smell of disinfectant mingled with the expensive perfume that still hung in the air. Mrs. Clare's screams cut through the silence of the rooms like blades, while Lisa lowered her head and continued to scrub the white marble floor. Behind that simple uniform there was a hidden pain and a strength that even she didn't know she had. How many women have walked invisibly within the walls of wealth, swallowing humiliation in the name of survival? How many were silent, even when their hearts cried out for justice? That day, something happened. A life was saved by a thoughtless gesture, and the woman ignored by everyone would become impossible to ignore, because the boy to whom she stretched out her arms, he called her Mommy. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. Sometimes fate puts an invisible woman right in the center of the scene, when all she wanted was to go unnoticed. That morning, amid the noise of cars and the smell of coffee coming from a chic coffee shop on the corner, tragedy was averted for seconds. A black SUV rolled down the street without braking, and little Ethan, with his clumsy steps, ran into the middle of the asphalt. That's when Lisa, on the other side of the sidewalk, dropped everything, including fear, and threw herself in front of the car, with her body stretched out like a shield. She saved the boy. He saved with his soul. But no one there had any idea what would come next. Because, when he woke up in the hospital, Ethan looked at that woman and called, "Mommy!" And it was from that word that the world of rich and lies began to crumble. If this story has touched you just with this beginning, if you feel that the world needs to hear more stories like this, of strong, real women who love in silence and fight without applause, then I ask you, support this story with a like, subscribe, and stay with me. Lisa never had anyone to defend her, but maybe today she has you. The alarm clock always rang at 4:30 a.m., but Lisa was already awake 10 minutes earlier. Sleep never came in full, and the body seemed to know it. The pre-dawn chill pierced the thin walls of the trailer parked on the outskirts of Oakland, where she had lived alone for 6 years. The dim light in the kitchen illuminated the freshly brewed black coffee, and the bitter smell of the drink mingled with the faint mold that came out of the old mattress. She sat in silence with the cup in her hands, staring into the void, as if waiting for an answer that never came. Then he would put on his navy blue uniform folded with care, tie his scarf in his hair, and say his low prayer, "Lord, just give me strength for today, just for today." On the way to San Francisco, Lisa crossed the city like a ghost. I took 2 buses and then the BART, always in the last seats, always silent. The people around lived in a hurry, headphones, screens in their eyes. No one greeted her, no one saw her, but she saw everything. Figures of families on the benches, children with heavy backpacks, couples arguing quietly. A world that moved too fast to notice the presence of a simple, tired, and invisible woman. He arrived at the Whitmore mansion at 7:15 a.m. sharp. The electronic gate opened without visual contact. Lisa entered through one side, where the service room was with buckets, cloths, and products organized with almost military precision. It began in the main hall, where the windows ran from floor to ceiling and let in too white a light that showed even what was not seen. It was there that she cleaned the imported Persian carpet, kneeling with a fine bristled brush while listening to the muffled sound of upstairs arguments. Claire Whitmore, the matriarch of the house, was an elegant, powerful and icy woman as the marble of the staircase. He wore high heels indoors and referred to Lisa as you, never by name. When I asked for something, I didn't ask for it. ordered. "You clean that mirror, now!" When he passed, he completely ignored the presence of the cleaning lady, as if she were part of the furniture. Thomas Whitmore, the patriarch, was rarely home. When he was, he immersed himself in video calls with investors or architecture magazines that he didn't let go of even for breakfast. Lisa knew him only by the sound of his voice, grave, indifferent. The Whitmore mansion's bathrooms shone brighter than Lisa's own face. She scrubbed the Italian porcelain tile floor hard, polished gold faucets, and collected used towels carefully, as if she did not want to offend the objects. Then he would go to the kitchen. She cooked elaborate dishes under the guidance of the chef, who only appeared at special events. But Lisa did everything: chopping, seasoning, cooking, tidying up. The guests dined, toasted, laughed. She watched from afar, behind the swing door, with a cloth in her hand and a knot in her chest. It was always like this, without a compliment, without a thank you. But what really hurt, it was silence. The silence of someone who works with love and returns home alone, without anyone asking how the day went. In that 3-story house, she was a spectre, a shadow that passed by and left everything clean without anyone noticing how much it cost. But there was one corner where her eyes shone again, the children's room. Ethan, the Whitmore's son, was 5 years old. He was curious, sweet, but very quiet for his age. He had sad eyes, which seemed always looking for shelter. Lisa noticed the expensive toys piled up in a corner and the silence in the midst of luxury. It was a silence just like hers. On one of the days, she found the boy drawing hidden behind the curtain. He looked up and smiled shyly. Lisa smiled back and just said, "Do you want me to clean up slowly here so it doesn't get in the way?" He nodded, and at that moment, something invisible brought them together. As she collected Ethan's clothes, Lisa held a children's T-shirt in her hands and felt her heart tighten. The memory came like a blade, the smell of smoke, the choked cry, the cry of despair on the night of the fire. His son, Noah, was only 4 years old when he died in Alabama. A short circuit burned the small wooden room where he slept. Lisa, at the time, was married, but the marriage did not survive the pain. Since then, she has carried that emptiness in her body, and no one saw it. That afternoon, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror while she washed the sink. The reflection showed a woman with early wrinkles, sunken eyes, calloused hands. But inside her, there was still love. Love that no one asked for. Love that overflowed even without space. It was at that moment that something tightened inside, a deep feeling which perhaps only other women understand, because there are pains that we carry in silence, like someone who holds the air so it doesn't sink. If you've ever felt this, that silence that screams inside, comment below. It touched me. It's true. What strength. Lisa took a deep breath, wiped a tear on her shoulder, and went back to work. He needed to finish the rooms before the boss's lunch. But her thoughts remained fixed. Why didn't anyone see what she felt? Why does the world insist on ignoring those who clean the traces of other life? That morning, she didn't even suspect that she was about to be seen. Not by a boss, not by an adult, but for someone who still knew how to love without filter, without prejudice, without a mask, and that pure look of a child. It was going to change everything. But would the world be prepared for this? The hallway of the Whitmore mansion was long and silent, lit by gilded chandeliers that hung from the high ceiling as if they belonged to another world. Lisa walked with the bucket in her hand and her steps light, trying not to attract attention, but that day something made her stop. A muffled, almost imperceptible sound came from under the main stairs. She bent down slowly and saw, huddled behind her suitcases, little Ethan, the boss's son, hugging his knees, his eyes wet and his face red with suppressed tears. Lisa's heart tightened. "Hey, little boy, are you okay?" she asked in a low voice, almost whispering. He did not answer. He just looked at her with those sad eyes, as if he was begging to be seen for real for the first time. Lisa left the bucket on the floor and sat next to him, right there, on the expensive carpet. He didn't ask anything. He just began to sing softly an old melody which his grandmother used to sing in the fields of Alabama. "Don't be afraid of the dark, child. The moon is watching you." Ethan leaned his head against his arm. It was the first touch, the first shelter. A different silence took over that forgotten corner of the house, not the silence of contempt, but that of connection. In the following days, something changed. Ethan started looking for her at times when Nanny Maribel was distracted by her cell phone. He hid behind the curtains in the closet near the laundry room. When he met her, he smiled and gestured for her to follow him. Lisa, with a cloth on her shoulders and her badge hanging from her pocket, pretended she didn't notice it at first. But then he began to leave small notes. He wrote on wrapping paper in his round, shy handwriting, "You are strong, even small." And "The world is less cold when we love." And she hid it behind the books in his room or inside the pockets of his hanging coats. Ethan collected those papers as if he were finding precious stones. Once, Lisa saw him hiding one of them under his pillow, as if keeping a secret. And it was just that, a secret that only the two of them understood. It was not rebellion, it was affection. An affection without a name, without a contract, without explanation. But it grew. Lisa knew the risk she was taking. She knew that in a house like that, the cleaning lady could not show too much affection, nor create intimacy. But how can we deny that? How to turn your back on a boy who trembled every time he heard his mother scream? Claire was always elegant, always made up, always well-dressed, but his eyes hardened every time Ethan did something off script. "Ethan, stop that! You're not a baby anymore," she said, even when he just wanted to be held. One morning, Lisa found Ethan standing in the kitchen doorway, his face against the wall. She was peeling carrots for the gala dinner that was coming up in the evening. The smell of garlic browning in butter filled the room. Ethan looked on in silence. Lisa took a small little arrow, washed it carefully, cut it into thin strips, and handed it to him as if it were a rare gift. He took it with both hands and muttered, "Thank you." It was the first time he had spoken directly to her. But that bond did not go unnoticed. Claire began to notice the looks, the approximations, the babysitter's absences, and Lisa's discreet but constant presence around Ethan. One day he watched through the window as Lisa gently combed the boy's hair, who let himself be done as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Claire pursed her lips, crossed her arms, and turned her back without saying anything. But there was poison in that silence. The tension grew slowly, like cracks in the marble of the perfect facade. Lisa noticed. He felt it in Claire's eyes as he passed her without greeting. I felt it in the drier tone of the requests, in the compliments that never came. And yet, he continued to do his work with the same care as always. He cleaned the mirrors that reflected the fake smiles of the house. He polished the silver cutlery that he would never touch. She spread the white towels in the bathrooms without staining it with her own pain, but inside something flourished. Lisa felt her heart beat differently every time Ethan ran to her. She felt as if the love that had been torn from her years ago had found a new place to live. A boy who was not yours, but that made her feel like a mother again. One night, back in the trailer, Lisa opened the small box of memories she kept hidden under her bed. Inside, there was an old photo of Noah, her son. He smiled with a toy car in his hands. She ran her fingers over his face and closed her eyes. A tear flowed silently, and then she whispered, "Thank you, God, for letting me feel that again, if only for a while." But little did she know that that time was about to be interrupted, because what started with a ticket, soon it would become an accusation, and someone inside that house was already preparing the first blow. Could Lisa's heart withstand being ripped out for a second time? The sky was still cloudy that Wednesday morning, and Lisa felt the weight of the migraine pulsing like a drum inside her head. After preparing breakfast for the bosses, he excused himself from the housekeeper to go to the pharmacy. He walked slowly along the wet sidewalks of Union Street, squinting against the light. The wind blew icy between the tall buildings, and the smell of fresh bread coming from a nearby coffee shop brought back for a moment the memory of a sweeter time, when his mother made corn crackers on Sunday mornings. But that memory was interrupted by something his eyes caught across the street, a small figure running in a hurry, leaving the coffee shop unsupervised. Ethan, the boy, was alone, without a coat, with his little hands thrown back, as if he were playing airplane. Lisa dropped the bag with the pills on the floor and screamed, "Ethan, stop!" But he didn't listen. At the same moment, a black SUV went down the slope with speed. The sound of the roaring engine filled the air. The seconds stretched out like rubber bands about to break. Lisa ran. He ran with his heart in his throat, his feet sliding on the wet cement. Time has stopped. And then, in an impulse that defied all logic, she threw herself towards the boy. She grabbed him by the waist and pulled him hard to the side. The car braked with a scream of tire, tearing through the asphalt, but it wasn't fast enough. The impact came like a dull explosion. Lisa felt her body spin in the air, and then the hard ground against her back. The head hit hard. The world was silent for a second. Ethan was crying. He was in her arms, dirty, scared but alive. Lisa tried to say something, but her mouth didn't respond. Everything slowly darkened, as if a heavy curtain was being pulled before his eyes. Security cameras on the corner captured everything. Within minutes, the images circulated message groups, social networks, local newscasts. Woman throws herself in front of car and saves child. Invisible heroine risks her life to protect boy in San Francisco. At the hospital, the room was quiet, except for the rhythmic beeping of the machines. Lisa woke up slowly, with the metallic taste of blood still stuck in her throat and her head throbbing. He felt something warm in his hand. It was Ethan's small hand, holding hers tightly. He looked at her, as if she were the only person who mattered in the world, and then, with a weak voice and watery eyes, he whispered, "Mommy?" At that moment, something inside Lisa broke and remade itself at the same time. It was as if all the pain she had buried, all the years of loneliness, all the silences, everything had found a new meaning there. Ethan didn't know his story. I didn't know his losses, but he saw in her something that no one else saw. He saw shelter. You saw love. Meanwhile, at the Whitmore mansion, Claire exploded on the phone with Nanny Maribel, who couldn't justify how she let the boy run away. Thomas, astonished by the repercussion of the video, tried to control the image crisis. Lisa's name was in the headlines. The woman who cleaned the floor was now a national affair, but not everyone was willing to applaud his courage, because in a house where everything is appearance, a pure truth like that gesture could become a threat. And what the boy's eyes saw with innocence, the adults around him would see with suspicion. Ethan wouldn't let go of her hand. She called Mommy every time she woke up during the night. Lisa, still weak, just smiled and caressed his hair. But he knew, deep in his soul, that such a spontaneous gesture would have a price, a high price, because a woman like her, she was not allowed to be seen as the mother of the child of millionaires, and it was only a matter of time before someone used it against her. But how far would a mother at heart be willing to fight to protect a love that was born of instinct? He woke up to the sound of the garbage truck passing by on the back street. The smell of reheated coffee filled the cramped trailer, now decorated with makeshift bouquets in glass jars. They were flowers left at the door by strangers, people who viewed the video, people who wrote notes like, "You gave me hope," and "Thank you for being light." But Lisa, sitting on the edge of the bed, barefoot on the cold floor, couldn't smile. She was alive. Ethan, too. But there was something in the air, something she couldn't name. She just felt. As one who senses a storm before the thunder. On television, the same image was repeated. The car braking, the rush, her body rolling on the asphalt with the boy in her arms. They called it a miracle of heroism, a divine gesture. The mayor of San Francisco had praised the courage in public. The local channel wanted an exclusive interview. But the only thing Lisa wanted was to go back. cleaning the windows in the living room again, folding the napkins, listening to the noise of Ethan's paws running down the wooden corridor. She wanted the routine back, but the Whitmore mansion had closed its doors. "We are reorganizing the shifts. Take some time to rest," they said by phone. No details, no return forecast. The governess's cold voice made it clear this was a withdrawal, not a care. And Thomas's silence, who didn't call, didn't send flowers, didn't even thank him personally, hurt more than any blow Lisa took in the accident. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere was different. Claire Whitmore paced back and forth, her heels hitting the marble floor like short shots. Magazines, online comments, messages from acquaintances, all talked about the brave woman who saved little Ethan. But what really disturbed her was something else. The boy. He would wake up at night calling for Lisa. She did not accept the new nanny. She cried with any attempt to approach. He refused food. At school, he drew the cleaning lady holding his hand inside a red heart. When asked by the psychologist who it was, he replied without hesitation, "My mother." Claire vented to Thomas in the glass office on the second floor. "This has already crossed the line. It's not normal. It's not healthy. This woman is confusing our son." Thomas, for the first time in a long time, did not respond. I just stared out the window in silence. "Don't you see? This whole approach, she manipulated. She wants something. Why, Thomas? Why would a boy like ours call that woman mother?" At Lisa's house, the silence was different. A tight silence which settled in the chest and gave no respite. She kept looking at her cell phone, waiting for a message that never came. I thought about Ethan, in his little hands holding yours, in the soft words, in the sad eyes. It was as if something in her had been torn out again, as if God had let her taste motherhood, only to later remember that it wasn't for her. That afternoon, Lisa went out to walk the streets of the neighborhood, in a battered coat and low cap. A lady who was passing by with the dog recognized her and smiled. "You're the girl in the video, right? How brave you are. The world needs more people like you." Lisa thanked her with a shy nod. He smiled, but his eyes did not follow. Why be seen? It was not the same as being welcomed. And that boy, so small, had been the only one who really saw her. She came home, lit a candle over the sink and stood there, watching the flame dance slowly. He took a deep breath, once, twice, and there, in that pause, she thought of all the women like her, who love in silence, who lose without fanfare, who go on in silence, carrying weights that no one sees. And if you're following this story right now, feeling this pain along with it, leave a like, subscribe. It is the most beautiful way to show that this silent love did not go unnoticed. Sometimes all a woman like Lisa needs, it is knowing that you are not alone. The next day, Lisa received a short call. It was from the social worker at the school where Ethan studied. "Mrs. Carter, just to let you know, we are evaluating Ethan's emotional reaction after the accident. There was an unusual attachment on his part to the lady. Claire Whitmore requested psychological evaluation. The case is being followed." Lisa thanked her, but when she hung up, the floor seemed to disappear under her feet. That love, so pure, was now treated as abnormal, as if it were a disease, as if loving too much was a crime. That same afternoon, someone threw an envelope under the trailer door. No sender. Inside, only a sentence typed in cold letters. "Don't get closer to the boy." "That's a warning." Lisa read and reread. His hands trembled, the throat closed, but she didn't cry. He took the leaf, burned it in the flame of the candle, and threw the ashes down the sink. In the depths of his eyes, he lit something he had been sleeping for a long time. Courage. But what she didn't know yet is that the worst was just beginning, because when the love of a simple woman threatens the pride of a powerful family, even the truth can be distorted. And the next blow would come where it hurt most, on honor. In the glass-enclosed room of the Whitmore mansion, Claire walked in circles like a caged lioness. The perfection of his world was cracking, and the crack had a navy blue name, face, and uniform. Lisa. The cleaning lady who cleaned her mirrors now shone brighter than the crystal chandeliers, and that Claire couldn't stand. In front of the makeup mirror, she squeezed her pearl earrings tightly, as if she wanted to tear the irritation out of her own skin. She became a martyr. "They are treating a cleaning lady as if she were a saint," she said in a low voice full of venom. Thomas, to the side, remained silent as always, but Claire had already made her decision. If public opinion wanted drama, it would put on a show, but under its script. He discreetly hired a lawyer specialized in image management, a blonde, elegant woman with a firm smile and icy eyes. "Let's control the narrative, Mrs. Whitmore. Show compassion in public, but let me dig the truth behind the scenes." Claire smiled for the first time in days. Great. Start now. And so, the plan was drawn up. In interviews, Claire went on to speak of the deep gratitude she felt for Lisa, but blurted out words like emotionally unstable behavior and excessive attachment. The public, who loves heroes, also loves scandals. All it took was a seed to be planted for the whispers to begin. Didn't that woman do everything on purpose? There's something strange. A cleaning lady too poor, with too much access. Days later, an exclusive article appeared in a digital tabloid. Headline in red letters: "Heroin cleaner once had a history of mental instability." The text was low, malicious, full of assumptions. It used distorted documents that showed Lisa in therapy sessions after her son's death. They turned their pain into a diagnosis they called mourning madness. The country that had called her a hero now looked at her with suspicion. Lisa learned about the story when she opened her cell phone in a small cafe where she was trying to deliver resumes. A hotel manager had considered hiring her as head maid. It was his chance to get out of the heavy cleaning and earn a little more. But after the news spread, the vacancy evaporated. "We have received worrying information about your emotional state," they said with cold formality on the phone. She hung up, unable to breathe. He returned to the trailer slowly, as if carrying his body out of obligation. He sat on the kitchen floor and hugged his knees. It hurt in places she didn't even know existed. So unfair, so cruel, and so familiar. The phone rang. It was the number of the local station. A reporter named Jack Monroe wanted to interview her. "No cuts, I want to hear your side." His voice was calm, direct, respectful. Lisa hesitated. I was too wounded. But there was something in that tone, a respect she hadn't heard in years. She accepted. When Jack arrived, he was surprised to see the small trailer surrounded by flowers, letters, and even toys sent by unknown mothers. "The world has seen you, Lisa, and a lot of people haven't forgotten what you did." She smiled slightly, but her eyes carried the shadow of someone who had already understood that to be seen, it can also mean being hunted. Jack sat in front of him. No cameras, no microphone, just a discreet recorder and a watchful eye. "Tell me, from the beginning, who are you, really?" And then, for the first time, Lisa spoke. Not as a cleaner, not as a martyr, but as a woman. He told about Noah, about the fire, about the sleepless nights, asking God for a second chance to love. He told about the moment he saw Ethan alone on the street and didn't think about it. He just ran. She told her about the scare, the hospital, the boy calling her mother, and finally about the anonymous letter, the threat. Jack listened to everything in silence. He took little note. I watched a lot. He saw the truth in the posture, in the pauses, in the tears she held. When the interview ended, he stayed there for a while longer. "You're not alone, Lisa. And I'm going to find out who's doing this to you." She nodded, but did not answer. She was exhausted, and there was still something heavier than slander, than the loss of opportunities, than loneliness, Ethan's absence. She had no more news of him. I didn't know if he was okay, if he was still crying, if he was still drawing hearts with her name inside. The next night, while cleaning the sink with automatic movements, Lisa suddenly stopped. The water flowed from the tap with a constant sound, and the steam from the kettle rose in slow spirals. In the silence of that modest kitchen, she leaned her forehead against the tile and closed her eyes. She felt small, vulnerable, but something inside her said, "It's not over." Because when you lose everything, even the fear gets smaller. And it was at that moment that a new envelope appeared under his door. This time, without threats. Just a photograph. Ethan in the garden of the mansion hugging a paper. On it, the words scribbled by a child's hand. "Come back, Mama Lisa." Lisa fell to her knees. Love was still there, but now she knew. Someone was watching her. Someone who didn't want her to come back. Who was behind that curtain of power. And how far would they be willing to go to erase it for good? The night came in colder than usual, and the wind whistled through the cracks in the trailer window as if to snatch away the little peace that still lived inside. Lisa wrapped herself in the faded blanket and stared at the ceiling, waiting for the sleep that didn't come. The kettle boiled in the background, the steam rising in spirals, repeating the same design as every night. But in that one, something would be different. The cell phone rang, an unknown call. For a second she thought about not answering. Lately every touch felt like a new blow. But something in the silence of that call called her. When he answered, the voice on the other end was so fragile, so familiar, that his heart almost stopped. "Mama Lisa," whispered Ethan. It was him. It was really him. She squeezed the phone with both hands and swallowed her tears. "It's me, my love. Are you okay?" The boy spoke softly, as if he was afraid of being heard. "The new nanny is always on her cell phone. I took it secretly. I have nightmares, Mum. I just want you." Lisa closed her eyes and felt the world spin. "Shh, it will pass. Close your eyes. Imagine that song I taught you. Remember her." Ethan hummed the melody quietly. It was enough. That was all. But the moment was short-lived. In the background, a noise of rapid footsteps. Ethan whispered, "Gotta go," and the call dropped. Lisa stood with the phone on her chest, motionless. I didn't know whether to cry or smile. She was alive inside that small heart, but surrounded by high walls. The next day, at 9:03 a.m., a brown envelope was placed under the trailer door. Inside, an official paper. Bold title, "Restraining Order." The court order was clear. Lisa Carter was prohibited from approaching within 300 yards of Ethan Whitmore or the Whitmore's property under penalty of imprisonment. Her blood ran cold. His hands trembled. She had to sit down. The leaf trembled as if it were made of wind. That was not just a legal measure. It was an emotional death sentence. It was to be torn away again from a love that they did not allow her to live. That afternoon at the corner market, she went to buy eggs and flour. I needed to distract my mind, but he felt the looks. The couple in line whispered. The cashier greeted her with a drier "good afternoon." A man, next to the water fountain, held his cell phone and discreetly filmed her. "It's her, the millionaire boy's wife." The whispers turned into walls, and Lisa realized that the same crowd that had once called her a hero now seemed ready to stone her without even asking her story. She returned to the trailer, dropped the bags in the sink, and knelt next to the bed. He closed his eyes and spoke to God, not with shouts, but with the voice of someone who already knows the silence of the answer. "Lord, I know that nothing is by chance. But why again? Why take away what has barely begun?" He cried silently, and in that wordless prayer he remembered the fire, from the smell of smoke, from the screams of Noah, the son he couldn't save, of the door that didn't open, from the neighbors who arrived late, from the small white coffin covered with flowers, and guilt, always her, like a wet cloth that never dries. She hugged the blanket with which she covered Ethan on the cold nights of the mansion. It still smelled like him, sweet, warm, and there, in the dark of the cramped room, Lisa felt like she was sinking. But it is precisely in these moments that the audience's heart tightens. Because everyone, one day, has felt alone against the world. And if you're still watching this story, it's because something in it hooked you. So stay, because what will Lisa find out next changes everything. It changes what you think about love, about loss, and even about justice. Later, Jack Monroe called again. He was restless. "Lisa, I'm going through some files, old contacts, and there's something strange about all this. The haste with which the court order was approved, it is not common. Someone is pulling strings really high." She listened in silence, not knowing what to say. Jack promised that he would call again with news. Lisa hung up and stared at the black screen of her phone. Something was hidden, but what she could never imagine. It's just that the truth they were trying to bury included much more than her, and maybe the boy she loved. He had never been, in fact, Claire's son. The news came as a discreet crack in a thick glass, small but impossible to ignore. Jack Monroe published the article on an independent portal with the simple, direct but weighty title, "What Are They Hiding from Lisa Carter?" It was the beginning of a quiet revolution. The article brought glaring inconsistencies in the process that culminated in the restraining order. Jack was able to prove that on the day Claire claimed to have had a troubling conversation with Lisa, alleging unstable and obsessed behavior, Claire herself was out of the country at a design conference in Milan. There were records, photos, stamps in the passport. The lie was exposed, albeit in silence. The general public did not react immediately, but behind the scenes, the castle was beginning to creak. Thomas Whitmore read the report with hard eyes, sitting in his wood-clad office. He called his wife. He confronted her bluntly. "Did you lie to justice, Claire?" She dodged. "I did what was best for Ethan. That woman moved him." But Thomas, who'd always been a shadow in his own house, felt for the first time the light fall on the cracks of the home. He no longer recognized his wife, or maybe had never really recognized it. Meanwhile, little Ethan languished. He refused food. "I cried at night. He had fevers with no apparent cause. He drew birds trapped in cages. The school psychologist called the Whitmores. The boy needs support. He needs the figure he lost." Claire, without batting an eyelid, suggested psychiatric hospitalization. "He's delusional." Thomas, in shock, objected. "He's not sick. He's suffering." The friction between the two increased. The marriage, which was already an appearance, began to crumble inside like a house infested with termites. Jack, increasingly involved, began interviewing former employees of the mansion. Gardeners, maids, even an old housekeeper. And the stories repeated themselves. Muffled screams, bought silences, strange orders, inexplicable withdrawals. A former nursing mother said that, years ago, Ethan appeared with bruises. "They said I had fallen down the stairs, but it didn't seem like it." Jack wrote everything down. The truth smelled, and he was getting closer and closer to finding her. In Lisa's trailer, the flowers were starting to wither, but she was going strong. She was injured, yes, but standing, and it was that night, while carefully folding the clothes to donate, the ones she had not worn since the accident, that she found a letter in the doorway. No sender, old calligraphy lettering, just one sentence. "You're not alone." She sat down slowly, with the letter in her lap, as if it were a relic. He read and reread until he memorized, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to smile. There was still someone who saw, someone who believed, and at that moment the narrator approaches those who watch with a heavy heart. There are pains that the world does not see, truths that are crushed by those who have more money, more power, more voice. But when a simple woman refuses to erase her history, something changes. If you've ever felt that pain of being silenced, ignored, discredited, comment here. He says, "I understand. It's true. I've been through this." Because when one heart speaks, another recognizes. And Lisa just needs to know that she's not talking to herself. That same night, the cell phone vibrated. An anonymous message. "Check the collar of the blue shirt in the left closet." Lisa ran to the trailer's makeshift closet. He searched piece by piece until he found the shirt. On the collar, sewn on the inside, a USB stick. His hands trembled. He plugged the device into the old notebook. There was only one video file. When he played, his heart stopped for seconds. The image trembled, but it was clear. Claire, in the garden of the mansion, screaming at the old nanny. If he mentions that woman again, you lose your job. Let him cry. Children forget. Lisa put her hand to her mouth to contain her sob. That was more than cruelty. It was inhumane. And if that was just the beginning of what had been hidden, what else was behind that perfect family? The morning dawned gray in San Francisco, as if heaven knew that on that day a child would tell more truth with a pencil than many adults have said in entire courtrooms. At Alamo Square Elementary School, the teacher handed out blank sheets of paper and boxes of crayons. The activity was simple. Draw what you love most in the world. The children immersed themselves in the paper with enthusiasm. Ethan, quietly in the corner of the room, chose only 3 colors: blue, red, and yellow. When he finished, he held the drawing as if holding a secret. He walked up to the school psychologist and said, "I want to give this to you. It's to show the world that it's true." On paper, 2 figures holding hands, a black woman in a blue uniform smiling, and a blonde boy next to her. On top, written in large, shaky letters, "She really loves me." In the bottom corner, a word surrounded by a red heart: family. The psychologist was silent for seconds, as if the air had disappeared from the room. This was not just a children's cartoon. It was a cry for emotional help. It was the voice of a child going through the noise of adult manipulations. On the same day, the document was sent to the Guardianship Council, and for the first time since the accident, justice looked in the right direction. The judge in charge of the case, a middle-aged man with a strong record in defense of childhood, requested an official assessment of the emotional bond between Ethan and Lisa Carter. The news fell like a bombshell inside the Whitmore mansion. Claire tried to prevent it in every way. He called lawyers, activated contacts, raised the tone with Thomas. But the law had already moved, and now the eyes of the court turned not to the cleaning lady, but for the biological mother who, until then, seemed more concerned with image than affection. Lisa received the summons in the late afternoon, delivered by an officer who apologized to see her so simple, so serene. "Ms. Carter, you are summoned to a preliminary hearing on the Ethan Whitmore case. The court wants to hear her." She nodded, the paper steady in her hands. Inside, the heart was a hurricane, but on the outside he maintained his posture, as always. It was just another difficult floor to clean. Only this time, it was the ground of truth itself. On the morning of the hearing, Lisa woke up early. He took a shower in silence. He separated the navy blue uniform he wore in the mansion, carefully ironed his white shirt, tied the shoes he wore to clean marble bathrooms. I didn't have a nice dress, no heels, no makeup, but he had dignity. And he entered that waiting room, as someone who has already cleaned the worst of the pain, with his own hands enters. He sat down, holding back his tears. At the other end of the hallway, Claire arrived with 2 lawyers, expensive clothes and sunglasses. He passed Lisa without looking, but something in her trembled, because now the narrative was no longer under his control. The courtroom was cold, smelling of old paper and watery coffee. Lisa was called. He stood up slowly, his hands clasped together. Jack Monroe was there, sitting in the back. He wrote everything down. The judge looked her in the eyes. "Mrs. Carter, do you confirm that you had an emotional bond with the minor Ethan Whitmore?" Lisa swallowed. "I didn't, Your Honor. I have." The room fell silent. "He's my boy, even if it didn't leave me." The judge asked for calm. He asked for details. And Lisa did. About the drawings, about the songs, about the fear she saw in Ethan's eyes, about the day of the accident, about the mommy said with so much truth that no certificate could deny it. The school psychologist was heard. He read the boy's note aloud. "She really loves me." Claire stiffened in her chair. Thomas lowered his eyes. Jack watched, and from behind his glasses he knew the world was beginning to listen. On the way out, Lisa walked slowly down the hallway. His eyes were full, but it was not from pain. It was something different. It was hope, the one that only appears when all seems lost, but a small gesture ignites again. And as she crossed that marble floor, so smooth, so far from the world in which she lives, Something inside her whispered, "It's near. It's very close." Outside, the cold wind cut through the skin, but Lisa didn't even feel it, because when justice starts to move, even slowly, the heart beats again in the right rhythm. But what she didn't know yet, the next document about to be delivered would change everything that was known about Ethan, including where he really came from. The San Francisco District Court looked more like a quiet theater that late morning. The high walls, polished wooden benches, and muffled whispers created a tense atmosphere, as if everyone there knew something important was about to happen. Lisa arrived with firm steps, wearing the same blue uniform with which she cleaned marble bathrooms. By his side, Jack Monroe carried a briefcase full of documents, notes, and courage. There were not many. They had no money, no legal team, no armored reputation. But they had the truth, and that day, was worth more than any designer suit. Claire Whitmore entered soon after, flanked by two expensive lawyers and with an impassive face. The impeccable makeup did not disguise the stiffness of the jaw. The audience watched in silence, waiting for the unfolding of a story that had escaped everyone's control. In the banks, anonymous faces mingled with discreet reporters. The case of the cleaning lady and the millionaire's son was now followed by the entire city. The judge, a grey-haired man with a serene look and a firm voice, opened the hearing with a sentence that made Lisa's heart beat faster. The truth doesn't always scream. Sometimes she whispers through small gestures. Ethan, accompanied by a child psychologist, was heard in a private room. He talked about the drawing, the smell of Lisa's shirt, the lullaby he still sang softly at night. He said, with childlike simplicity, that Mum is the one who protects when the world scares him. The testimonies came in sequence. Teachers told about Ethan's behavior before and after Lisa's entry into his life. The previous nanny, fired by Claire, confirmed that the child always sought out Lisa when he felt unwell. A neighbor of the mansion, Mrs. Margot, a lady of more than 80 years old, climbed to the bench with slow steps, but accurate eyes. "I see what happens from that balcony. I saw this boy smile for the first time when that woman arrived. This is not an invention, it's affection. And finally, Lisa." She stood up with moist eyes, but her spine erect. He said few words. He didn't defend himself. He told his story. He said he never wanted anything more than to take care. Who did not seek fame, nor money, nor rapprochement. That the connection was born out of the fear of losing another child, after the child she could not save. And that, even with everything he suffered, Ethan's eyes were laid again in front of a car. "I would do everything the same." Claire was then called to testify. He tried to sustain the thesis of manipulation. He said that Lisa seduced the boy with sweet words and questionable intentions, but he made a serious mistake. When the judge asked about the day of the call between Ethan and Lisa, Claire claimed to be at home and to have taken the cell phone with her bare hands. One of the lawyers, trying to intervene, handed the judge a document that she herself had filed days before, stating that she was out of town that day. Contradiction. The room froze. The judge just adjusted his glasses, wrote something down in silence, and said, "The truth has a firm footing. The lie stumbles." The session ended with the same sobriety with which it began. The judge did not give a verdict. He only stood up and said, "Justice is not done only with evidence, but with coherence, and with attention to gestures that seem too small to be noticed. Tomorrow we will make the decision." Lisa left the courtroom with her face blowing in the wind. The sun was low in the sky, but warm enough to warm his shoulders. Jack followed her in silence, respecting the emotion she still couldn't put into words. They stopped before the fountain in the square, and she looked at the water that danced in the air. "Do you think they'll let me see you again?" he asked in a low voice. Jack didn't answer. He just looked at her as if looking at a woman who doesn't know how strong she is. And it is at this time that the heart of those who watch tightens. Because if this story has come to you, it's because maybe at some point you've also been torn away from something you loved, unfairly. Without explanation, just because you didn't have enough power to be heard. And if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. On the way back to the trailer, Lisa found another anonymous letter. It was taped to the door, written in typewriter letters. Check the name of the hospital where Ethan was born. Not everything that glitters is heritage. She stopped, her eyes fixed on the page. The wind took her hair back, as if the world was saying, go, discovers. But what she didn't know yet, it's just that the name on Ethan's birth record carried a lie far greater than any rumor spread so far. And that lie was about to be unearthed. The video arrived on a rainy night, with no name, no sender, just an encrypted link sent to Jack Monroe's email. He opened the file, not knowing what to expect, but what he saw left his hands cold. Shaky images, captured by the interior camera of the Whitmore mansion, dated 3 weeks earlier. Claire appears in the winter garden, holding Ethan tightly by the arm. The boy tries to let go, crying. "Stop saying you love that woman," she shouts. "You are my son, only mine." Ethan sobs, his mouth open in a silent cry, and tries to run. Claire holds him, shakes him. "You're going to forget about this cleaning lady, you hear? You'll forget." Jack didn't think twice. He downloaded the video, saved it in several folders, and in less than 20 minutes, the content was already in the hands of a small network of independent journalists. At 7 in the morning, the video went viral. It was shared by activists, mothers, educators, and ordinary people who could not watch that scene without feeling a lump in their throat. The audience was divided between incredulity and fury. How could a mother act like that? And why did this child say with such certainty that the other woman was his real mother? Social networks exploded. Hashtags such as Justicia por Ethan and Lisa Merece Respeto occupied the trending topics. Sponsors of Whitmore Real Estate began to speak out, one by one. Some demanded explanations, others direct breakups. In less than 48 hours, 2 millionaire contracts were cancelled. The name Whitmore, which once stood for luxury and tradition, has come to carry a bitter taste. Claire, cornered, called a press conference at the Fairmont Hotel, trying to contain the bleeding. She entered the room with a hard look and heavy makeup, accompanied by the lawyers who seemed more lost than her. She read a written statement where she claimed to be emotionally shaken and that the video had been manipulated out of context. But words were of no use. The audience booed. Some people stood up. "You don't even love your son," one woman shouted. Claire hurriedly left, flashes bursting on her pale face. The image he had built for decades was crumbling, and there was not enough luxury to hold. In court, the video was added as supplementary evidence. The judge watched him in silence. When he finished, he just sighed, long and heavy. Justice is not done only with words. It is done with attentive eyes, and what I saw speaks for itself. Lisa, on the other side of the room, remained silent. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just took a deep breath and closed his eyes. His silence was more eloquent than any speech, because she knew the truth doesn't need to scream when it has already found its way. On the street, people began to recognize her, not as the cleaning lady of the accident, but as the woman who protected that boy with her body and soul. Flower shops began leaving small bouquets on his doorstep, wrapped with simple notes. "For you. Thank you for existing. Don't stop fighting." Lisa's quiet dignity, which had never justified itself or revolted, was now a symbol of resistance. And in the midst of all this, a phrase from the narrator seems to whisper directly to the heart of those who watch. Sometimes, life takes a long time to listen to those who never had a voice. But when he listens, the world begins to turn in the right direction. And if you're feeling that this story still has a lot to show, stay with me until the end. The strongest is yet to come. Jack, now more determined than ever, continued to dig into the Whitmore's past. Gathered all the data about Claire's pregnancy, hospital dates, doctors. Something didn't add up, and it was precisely this scoop A simple inconsistency in the name of the obstetrician registered at Ethan's birth that led him to a former nurse at Memorial Hospital, an elderly man now retired who trembled when he heard the name Claire Whitmore. She did something back then. I remember because I had to sign a document of silence. The baby wasn't hers. Jack froze. What do you mean, wasn't it hers? The nurse lowered his eyes. All I know is that there was an exchange. A baby disappeared that night. A woman, young, black, very hurt. She begged for answers. After, it's gone. Jack wrote down every word, his heart racing. A missing baby, a black woman begging for answers, a falsified record. But what he still needed to find out, it was the name of this woman. And if that name, so long erased, was it precisely the name that now shone in the corridors of the court? Lisa was sweeping up the dry leaves that were piling up in front of the trailer when she heard footsteps slow down behind her. The sound of an expensive shoe on the gravel did not suit that place. She turned slowly, already knowing who she was. Thomas Whitmore was there. But unlike the haughty man who crossed the corridors of his mansion with his eyes on his cell phone, he now had his hands in his pockets and a tiredness stamped on his soul. The designer suit seemed out of place with his thin body. He hesitated for a second, then said, "Can I talk to you?" Lisa nodded, speechless. They sat on the steps of the small balcony. The silence between the two was long, tense, until Thomas started. "I've never looked at you properly, have I? During all these years?" She did not answer. He looked straight ahead, fixing his gaze on nothing. "Claire, she got pregnant with me before Ethan. It was almost 8 years ago. We lost the baby at a few months. It was terrible. She never got over it. Was different." The wind blew lightly. Lisa held the cloth of her skirt with trembling fingers. "After that, Claire didn't want to get pregnant anymore. I was afraid, so we made an agreement. We use a surrogate." He paused, but she never fully accepted. She wanted the world to believe it was hers, only hers, and any shadow that threatened that, she eliminated it. Lisa watched him attentively, but without interrupting. That was more than a confession. It was a request for redemption. "When I saw Ethan with you, I saw my son laughing. I saw him being a child. And I realized how much I kept quiet for convenience, out of fear, out of shame." He ran his hand over his face, trying to contain his emotions. "She's going to keep going, Lisa. Claire has already lost contracts, reputation, dignity, but there's still Ethan, and she will not give it up." Lisa took a deep breath. I felt in my body that this was not an exaggeration. It was a premonition. Thomas stood up. Before leaving, he placed an envelope in his hands. "Here are the contacts of the woman who gave birth to Ethan. No one ever told her what happened after giving birth. Myself, I never wanted to know." Lisa clutched the envelope to her chest. "Why are you giving me this now?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Thomas hesitated. "Because maybe you are the only one capable of doing what is right." Alone again, Lisa entered the trailer and sat on the edge of the bed. He opened the envelope carefully. Inside there was a name, Celeste Jordan, a medical record, an old address in Sacramento. It's a black and white photo, worn but clear. Lisa stopped, the eyes fixed on that image. The woman in the photo. He had family traits. Curly hair like yours, a sweet look, almost like yours. His heart raced. It was as if, for a second, everything lined up inside her. The old questions, the nights without an answer, the lost son, the pain of childbirth followed by silence. And now, that boy who called her mother, without ever having learned that name. And it is at this point in the story that perhaps you who are listening to all this wonder, how far does fate go when it decides to sew what the world has torn apart? Stay with me, because the deepest line of that story is still being pulled. Lisa picked up the phone. He called Jack. "I need to go to Sacramento. I have a name." On the other end of the line, the journalist didn't even ask why. He just said, "I drive." And as the road opened before them, straight and silent. Lisa felt she was getting closer and closer to an answer that could blow everything up or heal centuries of silent pain. But what she didn't imagine, it's just that someone else also had that name, and I was already acting so that it would never come to light. The morning began with a strange, dense silence, as if the world held the air before a gale. Lisa was finishing preparing a thin coffee when she heard the knock on the door. It was Jack, his face tense. She disappeared, Claire, and she took Ethan with her. Time has stopped. The glass she was holding fell to the ground and shattered. The journalist held out his cell phone with the notification. Ethan's school had informed the child of the early removal by a guardian, a court authorization signed by Thomas Whitmore. But Thomas was in a meeting with the judge that morning. The signature was fake. Lisa's blood ran cold. Jack was already on the phone with his contacts in the police department. The order was clear: immediate alert throughout the San Francisco region and surrounding areas. Claire had disappeared with the child and could have been trying to cross the state line. It was a desperate action, but not thoughtless. The woman who had lost control of the narrative and prestige now clung to what was left, Ethan's emotional possession. Meanwhile, on Interstate 80, a black SUV was hurtling through the heavy fog with reckless speed. Claire kept one hand on the steering wheel, the other on the boy's shoulder, who slept under the effect of a mild tranquilizer. "We're going to start over, just the two of us," she whispered. But the wet road and racing mind were a dangerous mix. She didn't notice the truck coming in the cross lane until it was too late. The impact was violent. Glass flew. The bodywork twisted. And for an instant, everything went dark. Hours later, the sirens broke the silence. Police and paramedics surrounded the scene. Claire was found in the driver's seat with a bloody face but conscious. Ethan, trapped in the safety seat, had only minor abrasions. The collision, although brutal, was not fatal. What came next, however, was even more devastating. Claire's arrest in flagrante for kidnapping, misrepresentation, and judicial disobedience. The world she fought so hard to control collapsed publicly, in front of cameras, microphones, and headlines, and the name that came up in all of them, in firm letters, was that of Lisa Carter, the woman who saved the same boy twice, once from the car, and now from her own mother. At the hospital, Ethan woke up in a room filled with white light and the smell of disinfectant. Beside him, a nurse smiled. "You're safe now, dear." But the boy looked around and asked hoarsely, "Where's Mommy?" The nurse got confused. "Your mother is under observation." He shook his head. "No, the other mom, the real one." Meanwhile, in the hospital corridor, Lisa arrived by taxi, her hands clasped in her lap and her eyes teary. The police released her on one condition: not to enter without authorization. But the social worker emerged, moved. "He's asking for you, just for you." And it was at that moment that Lisa knew. This moment was greater than anything she had ever experienced. It was the crossing from pain to love, from silence to recognition. So if you've come this far feeling every beat of this story, perhaps you understand that what is happening goes beyond a simple legal battle. It is the struggle of an invisible woman to be recognized where she has always been erased. And if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Lisa entered the room with light steps. Ethan saw her and opened his arms, still covered in threads and bandages. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking. She approached and hugged him carefully, as if she wanted to protect him, even from the air. It was a silent old cry that came out of the depths of their souls. It was as if, finally, the universe was giving back what it once took by force. Jack Monroe watched the scene through the window with a lump in his throat. He took one photo, just one, without flash, an image that was worth more than any headline. And then his cell phone vibrated, an unknown number. He answered. On the other side, a female voice, aged but firm. "My name is Celeste Jordan. Someone told me that you are looking for the truth." Jack swallowed. Yes, he was. But what this woman carried, it could change everything. Lisa stopped in front of the white door with the little blue sign that said, "Pediatrics, room 307. Her hand trembled as she held the handle. Inside was the boy who, without knowing why, recognized her before any judge, reporter, or psychologist. The sound of the heart monitor leaked through the doorway, rhythmic, alive. It was the sound of a small but brave heart that insisted on beating even after so much fear, so much absence, and so much silence. Lisa took a deep breath and pushed the door down slowly. Ethan was sitting on the bed with a bandage on his forehead and a drawing in his hands. When he saw that figure standing in the doorway, the worn uniform, the teary eyes, the fragile smile, his little eyes lit up. "Mommy," he said quietly, with the certainty of someone who recognizes his own name in the mirror. And then he ran to her, ignoring wires and sensors tripping over the sheet. Lisa held him before the fall, as she always did without anyone seeing. She hugged that small, fragile little body so tightly that it seemed to try to glue back the pieces of her own past. She cried silently, her face glued to his messy blonde hair. "You're safe now, my love," he whispered. "You're safe now." Behind them, standing on the doorframe, Thomas watched the scene in silence. The red eyes betrayed the conflict between guilt and relief. That man who had spent his life collecting real estate and speeches now understood, for the first time, what a home meant. It wasn't the size of the room, it was the warmth of that embrace. When Lisa looked at him, she met a different look, not that of a boss, but of a father. Thomas approached slowly. He touched her shoulder respectfully. "If you want, if you accept, I would like you to continue with him, not as an employee, but as part of his life." "How? As a mother?" Lisa did not answer. He just nodded, tears flowing. It was as if, finally, the world had looked at her without haste, without judgment, and recognized what had always been there. A whole woman with love to give, even when the world said she had nothing. On social networks, the video of that reunion, unintentionally recorded by the emotional nurse, exploded in minutes. Hashtags such as "Mundo Corazón," "Justiça por Lisa," and "Amor no se compra" dominated timelines. People from all over the country sent messages of support, flowers, prayers. Women who raised other people's children, men who were raised by women like Lisa, young men who had never known their mothers, all found in that scene a universal truth. The internet, for the first time in months, silenced the rumors and heard the voice of a real love. And at the center of it all, she was Lisa Carter, the invisible woman who loved a boy before she even knew why. And it is at this moment that you, who felt every tear, every injustice, need to know one thing. What was to come could still change everything, because a forgotten name was about to reappear, and with him, a secret that no one expected. The late afternoon sun bathed the modest facade of the townhouse in Berkeley in a serene golden hue, almost as if the sky was apologizing for everything she had been through. It was there, among freshly painted walls and simple furniture donated by neighbors, that Lisa began to build, piece by piece, a new life. In the small kitchen, with the sweet smell of vanilla cookies fresh out of the oven, she adjusted the dishes on the table, while Ethan ran down the aisle barefoot and with a light laugh. "Watch out for the carpet, young man," she said, with a smile that rose from her eyes and spread across her face. This was an ordinary Sunday afternoon, but for Lisa, every second there was a living miracle. After months of pain, trials, and silent battles, the judge's decision had come like a gentle breeze. Provisional, shared custody. Ethan would spend the weekends with her, and the rest of the days with his father, Thomas, who was now trying to rebuild himself as a man and as a father, away from Claire's shadows. With the help of Jack Monroe, who organized a virtual fundraiser that thrilled thousands of people with his report, Lisa was able to rent the townhouse and began to attend, at night, a training course in early childhood education. It was as if every brick in that place had been laid by the hands of those who believed in her, people she had never seen, but who saw in her something that even Lisa herself had seen before: value. On the living room wall, a colored paper made by Ethan read in crooked letters, "Mama Lisa's house." The first time the boy said it in public, holding his hand at the local farmer's market, Lisa felt her legs fail. Not because of the fright, but because of the certainty. No one there doubted, no one questioned. The fruit seller smiled. The lady at the bread stand said, "He's a lucky boy." For the first time, she didn't have to explain. He didn't need to prove it. The city, once blind, now saw. At night, while studying, sitting on the couch with open books, Lisa would look back and forth at Ethan's room, where he slept with the lamp on and the teddy bear he had been given by the hospital nurse. The same bear she held the day she called her mommy. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. There was still fear, yes. There were still traumas. But now there was also peace. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. Enjoy this video and subscribe, and let's make this story reach those who need it. Because sometimes all one needs is to know that the impossible also happens. And while Lisa was jotting something down in the notebook, the phone vibrated. It was a message from Jack. Just one sentence. "We need to talk. Something important has emerged." Her heart tightened. On the other side of town, Claire stared into the mirror with sunken eyes and an ankle bracelet flashing red at her ankle. The prosecution had opened a formal investigation, but she still kept secrets, and one of them, it was too big to remain buried. But was Lisa ready to find out what was yet to be revealed? The soft clatter of brushes dipping into cans of colored paint mingled with the light laughter of children in the backyard. The old garage of Lisa's Berkeley home now looked like another world. Freshly plastered walls, simple fabric curtains hand-sewn by neighbors, shelves full of donated toys and children's books. In the center of it all was a sign made of light wood, hung over the door with letters written by Ethan, Hope Foundation. It was there that another chapter of Lisa's life began, not as a survivor, but as a sour. The woman who once cleaned out the hidden corners of the Whitmore mansion now welcomed women like her, invisible, exhausted, but full of love that the world insisted on ignoring. On that Saturday afternoon, the sun touched the windows gently, and Lisa organized a reading circle with 3 grieving mothers, 2 recently fired cleaners, and a pregnant teenager. They listened in silence to a story about new beginnings, and in each sentence there seemed to be a mirror. Lisa read in a firm voice, but her eyes revealed everything her heart still felt: the longing for the son she lost, the fright of the accident, the days she spent in silence while being called crazy. Outside, Ethan was helping paint one of the walls with other children. Next to a yellow sun, he drew 3 figures holding hands and wrote in large letters, "Family is who cares." When Jack Monroe arrived with his camera, he captured that scene in silence. The journalist turned Lisa's story into a moving documentary, which began with footage of the cleaning lady cleaning toilets and ended with her hugging a woman in tears, saying, "Here, you don't have to pretend you're okay." Thomas Whitmore, as a sign of regret and support, donated land in the interior of California for the expansion of the project. There, it was planned to build a larger shelter with reception rooms, workshops, and a small playground. "This place belongs to those who have never had a place," he said during a small ceremony with the local community. And as the days passed, Lisa bloomed. It wasn't fame, it wasn't glory, it was felt. It was knowing that what hurt in her could heal in others. In an interview with local TV, sitting in a wicker chair on the balcony of the new headquarters, she looked at the camera with the same look she wore when cleaning crystals, but now without fear of being seen. "I had no children from the womb, but God gave me children from life. That's it. Nobody can take that away from me." It was at this point that the journalist turned off the camera, and for a few seconds there was a deep silence. Even the wind seemed to respect that speech, and if you've come this far listening to this story, maybe you're also looking for a place where your pain fits, where your silence finds a voice, where your love, even if wounded, is still seen. Don't give up now, because the deepest part of this story is yet to happen, because in the midst of building this new future, an unexpected letter arrived in the mail, addressed to Lisa. There was no sender, but inside the envelope, there was something that could change everything. What was still hidden in the shadows of the past. The hallway was icy, with grey walls and muffled sounds of footsteps and metal doors opening. Lisa walked slowly, unhurriedly, but also without fear. He wore a light blue blouse and simple pants of thick fabric, her hair tied in a low bun, her eyes steady, without makeup, as she always was. Worthy. In her heart, a silent peace that she didn't even know where it came from. Maybe it was from faith, or maybe it was from love that she relearned to feel without expecting a return. The prison officer indicated the restricted visiting room, where the conversations took place separated by a small table and chairs attached to the floor. Claire Whitmore was already seated, pale. The dark circles under her eyes marked as bruises of the soul, without the impeccable hair, without heels, without the upright posture of a millionaire woman. Only the skin, the bone, and the guilt remained. Lisa stopped in front of her, and for a few seconds they just looked at each other. Neither of them said anything. The silence there screamed louder than years of accusations, headlines, leaked videos, and veiled insults. Claire was the one who broke the silence first, her voice hoarse, low. "Thank you for coming." Lisa nodded, but didn't answer. Claire hesitated, took a breath, and then began. "I lost my ground. First when I lost my baby. Then when I saw myself being replaced in Ethan's gaze, I couldn't control anything anymore. Not my son, not my husband, not my own sanity. And then you showed up." Lisa kept her gaze fixed, not looking away. Claire continued, now with trembling hands on the table. "You have no idea what it's like to grow up being taught not to lose, to never show weakness, pretending happiness to save reputation. I didn't know how to be a mother. And when I saw that you knew, I went crazy." The cleaning lady took a deep breath. There was no surprise, all that she already imagined. He had already felt it between the lines of Claire's eyes, in the silences of the mansion, in the way the emptiness of that house echoed inside the walls. Lisa leaned forward slightly, crossed her hands, and then replied softly and firmly, "The difference between us, Claire, it's just that I never wanted to have power. I just wanted to love." Claire closed her eyes and cried. Not a cry of spectacle. It was a silent, broken cry, as if some internal dam had finally given way. Lisa watched her for a moment. For the first time, she saw there not the villain, not the rich and cruel woman, but a soul stripped of her weapons. There was no hug, nor words of comfort. It was not necessary. Lisa got up slowly, unhurriedly, adjusted her chair, and before leaving looked once more at Claire. There was no forgiveness said, but there was liberation. As he walked through the security gate and back to the sidewalk outside, the morning light hit his face as if the day was starting again. Lisa took a deep breath, as if that new air washed away everything that had once weighed too much. She had left there, in that cold room, the last piece of the past that still held her, because sometimes winning is not humiliating the enemy. It's looking into the eyes of those who hurt you and choosing not to carry that pain anymore. But when Lisa got home that afternoon, something unexpected was waiting for her on the table. A correspondence from the Department of Justice, a white envelope with an official seal. When she opened it, the content made her heart stop for a second. What was written there? It could change the course of everything again. Who had sent that? And why? Right now. The sky of Napa Valley looked hand-painted that afternoon. A golden hue spread among the hills covered with vineyards, as if the sun, in reverence for that story, had decided to say goodbye more slowly. Around the field, rustic wooden arches were decorated with lavenders, daisies, and small eucalyptus branches. The chairs, arranged in a half-moon, were occupied by familiar and moved faces, ex-cleaners with teary eyes, children from the foundation with simple clothes and pure smiles, neighbors from Oakland and Berkeley who became family through affection. In the center of it all, in a white, delicate, lackluster cotton dress, Lisa walked arm in arm with Ethan, now 6, wearing navy blue suspenders and holding tight to the ring cushion. Her steps were light, but her heart beat so hard that even her hands trembled, not out of fear. It was gratitude. It was love overflowing all over her body after so many scars. Jack Monroe was waiting for her under the arch, the same calm smile as always, his eyes teary. When she saw her approaching, she discreetly wiped away a tear and opened her arms as if to say, "Now it's your turn to be loved." The ceremony was short, but no one there would forget every second. A pastor friend of the foundation read simple words about a new beginning, about love that heals what life has torn. When Lisa and Jack exchanged vows, there were no grandiose promises, only truth. She said, "I learned to survive on my own, but today I choose to live with you." He replied, "You taught me to see things that no one else saw." The kiss was soft, long, shy, but deep as a dive into clean waters after years of storm. Ethan was the first to applaud. He jumped for joy, ran to both of them, and grabbed both arms as if to say to the world, "Those are mine." Lisa knelt down to get to his height, and before any words, the boy held her face with his small hands and asked quietly, "Mommy, now are you happy?" She smiled, holding back her tears, and replied, "Now I have everything." That was enough. The entire audience cried without shame. The reception took place right there, outdoors. Long tables with white tablecloths, breads made by women from the foundation, natural juices, simple cakes. Nothing luxurious, but everything made with care. Thomas Whitmore asked for the floor. He wore dark jeans and a light shirt, far from the arrogant image of months ago. The voice came out firm but emotional. "I was a blind man for many years. I saw numbers, contracts, appearance, but what this woman did for my son and for his heart, it is greater than any fortune. Thank you, Lisa, for everything." She nodded silently, and the applause that followed wasn't just out of politeness, it was out of justice. As the sky gradually darkened, Lisa took off her shoes, took Ethan by the hand, and led him to the center of the wheel. Soft music began to play, and she danced with the boy in her arms, spinning slowly, feeling time stop. There, in the middle of that field, surrounded by those who chose to stay by her side even when all seemed lost, Lisa understood that love cannot be bought, imposed, or demanded. Love, the true one, recognizes itself, and there, at that moment, she was recognized in her entirety. But as the lights flickered softly between the branches, illuminating the smiles and tears of joy, Lisa walked away for a moment, alone, walking to the edge of the vineyard. In her dress pocket, she still carried the envelope that had arrived days before the wedding, the one coming from the Department of Justice. It was something she hadn't told anyone. A name, a document, a secret hidden for years, which was now about to be revealed. And when she opened it, finally, she would understand that her past held much more than pain. He kept a piece that could change everything once again. But was her heart ready to find out who, really, was the father of the child she thought she had lost forever? The sun filtered through the trees of the Hope Foundation as childish laughter filled the air. Lisa walked slowly through the garden, with a serene smile and a light heart, holding Ethan's hand, now older, more confident, happier. Jack filmed from afar, capturing what no script could write. The real transformation of a woman who was once forgotten by everyone but God, and a boy who called her Mommy. Thomas appeared from time to time to help with the projects, quieter, more human. Claire, now a recluse, received psychological counseling and supervised visits. The past, even with its pain, no longer had strength over Lisa. She lived in peace, with her face held high and her soul scarred. The mystery letter, just a misinterpreted clue. The name on the envelope was that of a former maternity employee who just wanted to acknowledge the error of old records and return to Lisa the original medical record of her lost son. now filed with the title Son of Courage. And it was there, sitting among the children of the foundation, with Ethan leaning against her shoulder, that Lisa said softly to the camera, "Life has taught me that you are not always born where you belong. But when you love with truth, God opens a way. They called me a maid, crazy, obsessed, but a child's heart saw me as a mother, and no one can erase that." The screen went dark, but the message remained like a tattoo on the soul. Never underestimate the love of those who serve in silence. That's where God works miracles. And maybe, if you've watched this far with an open heart, you felt that this story was also about you, about everyone who's ever been diminished, ignored, judged. But he never stopped loving. Sometimes all a life needs is to be seen with love. Thank you for staying here, for being a presence on this crossing. Your like is like a tight hug that warms and strengthens this channel. Your registration is like an invitation to have the next coffee with us in that same place of listening and affection. Comment here which city you are watching us from. It is so beautiful to see how far this story has come. And it activates the bell, so you don't lose it when the coffee is ironed again. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.